I'm on for my Zoom meeting.
Oh, you sound underwater.
Yeah.
Is there a fight?
I think Matt might have some connective issues.
I think someone's ruffling some papers or eating a lot of potato chips.
Okay, there you are, Matt. All right. I think we're all here. So let's start the meeting. Today is, what is today? Today's June 7th. For the Zoning Board of Appeals, Town of Victor, we'll start the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
for liberty and justice for all.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. Okay. Next, I need approval of the May 17th, 2021 minutes. I have a motion for that.
I make that motion.
Thank you, Fred. Second.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Donna. All in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Great, good, thank you. Okay. Our application today is the Wilkins RV. There's three pieces to this, three variances. We'll go through that in a minute. I think, let's see, Alex, I'm going to take a guess. Can I call you Alex or you want Alexander?
Alex is great.
Alex, okay. So I think you know the drill, Alex. Yes, you've done applications before.
Yep.
Okay, great. So just real quick, we're going to create a record and we're going to do our best not to talk over each other. We're going to give you plenty of opportunity to make a presentation. The board then will ask questions, some more than others. But at the end of the day, because, and Ken, correct me if I'm wrong, but because it's on Route 96, County Planning Board will review this on June 9th. So we can't make a determination this cycle. We'll have to do it the next cycle. Okay. Now, I had a conversation with Donna, one of our board members. She has a conflict. I believe it is her husband that works for the applicant. So that would cause a conflict of interest. I agree. So Donna, unless you want to say anything else, you need to recuse yourself, and that's all you need to do today.
All right, I will recuse myself from this application
Good, thanks so much.
and I'll sign off. Bye, guys.
Good, thanks.
Bye. Bye.
Okay, Alex, there are three variances, one being the building improvements are within 100 feet of the wetlands. Another is that no vehicle parking within 80 feet of the right of way. And the third deals with the fence being greater than 2 feet. I did review the application, and there was a nuance that you pointed out. I'm also aware of it, that there is a variance that would apply to the 80-foot right of way. And I think back in, was it 1999? Yeah, 1999, there was a variance for 50 feet. So certainly if you want to touch on that, that's fine. You'll basically have, if you'll, two bites at the apple. You'll make the application today, the state, let us know whatever you want. And then we'll get the county planning board recommendations. We'll come back. There probably is going to be some more questions for you. You'll have another opportunity to make a presentation. So if you don't get it today, you'll get it the next cycle. So Go ahead, make your presentation.
Great. Thank you again for having us and summarizing the three variances. Already introduced myself, but Alex Amering with Costage Engineering. With me is also Brian Wilkins, the owner of the Wilkins RV franchises. I'll touch more on the technical items, and he'll certainly chime in as it relates to the operation. Little history on the project. Obviously, it was the former Ballantine RV a few years ago. Brian purchased the property. He owns a couple other locations, Bath and Churchville. So a few months ago, Brian approached us, and we started looking at some opportunities to make improvements to the site. Obviously, there's some history between the old approvals as Ballantine and the two separate buildings, which is kind of what drove all of this. Right now, you have the showroom on the building to the left side of the screen, and then the service building more to the south. From an operational standpoint, that's pretty far from ideal for him. You really want the two buildings together. So we started brainstorming on ways that we could demolish the existing showroom and connect it to the service building. Obviously, with that comes new architecture and a lot of other improvements, which aren't necessarily before this board, but we did have the opportunity to meet with the planning board, and I think what we were proposing was generally pretty well received. So one of the initial steps, we obviously went out and surveyed the entire property. We had a wetland delineation done, which was done in coordination with New York State DEC, because they are state wetlands. We then located the wetlands, which you can see are the flagged points around the perimeter. We had the opportunity right off the bat to meet with town staff via workshop. The town engineer was there, code enforcement was there. And then essentially we went through a whole number of layout revisions. The plan before you has been looked over quite a number of times to essentially look at what alternatives we had, which kind of best mitigated any of the variances. At one point, the building was shown connecting to the west end of the service building. Then we put it on the east end of the service building with the connection on the east side. And then it was actually pushed off the north corner where you see on the plan today. So touching on the three variances, obviously we put together a packet, which I believe all the board members should have. There's a number of supporting materials in there. Obviously the most important, from a basis of review, are the 5 factors for consideration. Looking at the project from a safety standpoint, from the overall benefit versus the relief from the town code that we're asking. Each of the variances, we went through the 5 factors. Obviously, the 3 variances are very unique within themselves, one being a parking setback, one a wetland buffer, and one being a fence. So what you'll see is a number of them really come back to one common item. It's pre-existing non-conforming, as we kind of refer to it. There was a 50-foot setback approved off of 96 for Ballantine sometime between then and when Brian purchased the property. Obviously, some of the vehicles got pushed forward, And what we're ultimately requesting for that, I think, is 46.7 feet. And how we accomplish that would be by putting a drive aisle in front of the display vehicles, which keeps them, set further back into the site. As far as the setback on Omnitech, one of the more, I think, important considerations is when Ballantyne was approved, Omnitech Drive didn't exist. That whole business park wasn't back there. And when they did the development of the road for that project, they actually chopped off a corner of the property, which would be on the far west side or left side of the screen. So you'll see that setback was not self-created. It was created by, nature of the development of Omnitech and, the businesses that went along with it. The fence itself, we're proposing a decorative aluminum fence. I think, going through the corridor there, you'll see a similar style as utilized on some other projects. Obviously, that particular style fence was selected with the aesthetics in mind, view from the public right of way. We did include a cut sheet and a photo. Mr. Wilkins has used the same fence on other of his facilities, particularly along the right of way, where views are important. Jumping kind of into the wetland request, obviously the town adopted a code section which pretty closely mirrors what the New York State DEC requires. They refer to it as, 100-foot buffer. The town kind of refers to it as 100-foot setback. Going back, we were researching with town staff, whether there was any variances for that, because the Ballantyne plan, which I included, I think, in the packet, had a substantial amount of parking within the buffer. That was approved by the planning board, but we couldn't find any records of variances to go along with it. I obviously discussed, we've engaged New York State DEC right at the onset of the project. We're working with an environmental consultant, Gene Paulette, who runs Environmental Resources LLC. And he had the opportunity to meet with the DEC biologist and go through what we are proposing. One of the particular items that we would be looking to do is eliminate some small portions of the parking at the rear and do some stormwater enhancements. That's obviously something we've reviewed in more detail with town staff and the town engineer and the planning board. Stormwater doesn't, play so much a role for the zoning board, but it is something the DEC, would look favorably upon. The original project predated any sort of stormwater requirements, so it's something that we're able to implement, if the project moves forward. And ultimately, to do the work in the 100-foot buffer, we would need to get the permit from New York State DEC, so we understand any approval as far as the variance would, it would be reasonable to expect, the DEC permit as a condition of the approval. So, so a few of the common themes I kind of touched on are, first off, the existing conditions. We're working on a site where we're essentially bordered by wetlands on 3 sides. The property is actually about 24 acres and we can only use about 9 acres of it. So we're working within a footprint that's, pretty small compared to the overall project size. the site constraints, and then the overall safety and benefit of what we're proposing, landscape, stormwater. Through the planning board referral process, we have gotten feedback from a number of agencies. It went to New York State DEC. It went to the New York State DOT, who owns the road, obviously. One of the big components of the project is we'll be closing the 2 access points onto 96, which are closer to Omnitech, and we would be replacing it with a single driveway entrance, which is further to the east. The DOT is in big favor of that because it aligns with the DOT access management guidelines, going from multiple curb cuts to 1 curb cut. Also, from the owner's standpoint, it does a lot better job of it separates customers from the display areas. So you don't have pedestrians walking through where RVs are driving through. That kind of plays into also the request for the fence. There has been issues, with theft, and I believe even recently some catalytic converters were cut out of some of the units. Obviously, that kind of activity is a draw on, the town police resources and that kind of thing. So I think that kind of concludes my formal presentation. I'm happy to go through any of the 5 factors or answer questions in general, and I'm sure Brian will chime in as he sees fit.
Hey, thanks, Alex. Sarah, you have any questions?
So I wrote down a few stuff as Alex was talking. So have you gotten feedback from the DEC on their thoughts of being within that 100-foot buffer?
Yep. So the big things DEC was interested in, they were interested in measures that we could implement that would further prevent any encroachment. And so one thing we would be putting in is a fence even around the rear of the project. Obviously, once a fence is put in, the parking's limited to the inside of the fence. So they were also in favor of the stormwater enhancements because all the water drains from the parking lots right to the wetland. So doing the rain gardens, gives it a pre-treatment benefit.
My next question was the distance from that the 6-foot fence would be from the right of way.
It's going to be right at the edge of the pavement, which we pretty much matched what was out there today.
Okay.
It's about 15 feet.
Okay. So on the Omnitech drive or place side of, is the parking area right on the property line currently and will remain that way?
It's about, I think, 4.5 feet off the property line.
Okay. And then my other just basic comment would be that you use terms of pre-existing, non-conforming. And my thoughts for that are, we're upgrading this site in this parcel. So we wouldn't have those pre-existing, non-conforming fallback issues anymore. And I would think that going forward, our goal would be to try to fix those pre-existing, non-conforming issues. I think that's what I have at this point, Mike, but I had another question, but it's escaped me at this point, but once I have it, I'll let you know.
We'll circle back. No
Okay.
worries. Fred, questions?
I don't have any right now.
Okay. Matt?
Yeah, I did know everything that Sarah had said. One thing that I'd like to see is, do we have a site plan for what the site would look like if you had to maintain compliance with the current codes and the existing variances on the site. Like what would it look like? What would you have to do? I get it. There might be things you have to move 4 feet here, 10 feet there, but I'd really like to understand what all of that is, instead of trying to just pull the previously existing non-conforming. What does it really take to get the site back into compliance? What does that look like? What does it cost? What are those deltas? I think it's always good to show those kind of contrasts. And that's my arms around something like this. There's a lot of different, a lot of moving parts here, and some kind of visual that can show us, okay, look, board, if we had to adhere to existing codes and compliance, here's what it would look like. And some applicants, when they do that, it's just obvious that, yeah, there needs to be some leniency here or there. And in others, sometimes when they put it together, it's really not too far off. I know there's a variance already for the 50-foot setback. I know you want 46, but what would it look like if you had to stay at 50? Those kinds of things.
Yep, I agree. I echo that. I was thinking that similar to, from time to time, we've had applicants come and say, well, yeah, I know we've had a variance before, but now we want more. And if that's the case, if this board keeps granting variance on top of variance, then there's something wrong. So I like the idea. I'd like to see what it is that you're asking for with the variances, proposed variances, and what it would look like if you had to comply with the code. So what I'd like to know, though, and maybe more specific to flush it out, you're looking for 46.7 feet. Is that on 96 or is that on the tech side or both?
The 46.7 is on Route 96.
Okay, so you are looking for more. You had a 50-foot variance and now you want a little bit more, 46. I know it's still a few feet, but to Matt's point, I think showing what you're asking for, and it probably is going to help this board out quite a bit to understand why it is that you're asking for that.
Yeah, and kind of how we arrived at that number, it seems like a random number, I know, but so the vehicles I think are parked at about 15 feet off the right of way today. And what we would be doing is putting a drive aisle in front of the vehicles, so they could double stack them, and the drive aisle would be 30 feet, which then pushes you up to, the 46, whatever, and change. So,
yeah. Alex, do you mind if I jump in on that one quick?
Sure.
This is Brian. Basically what we've proposed is that the fence line mirrors where the current fence line is. Our vehicles are towed vehicles, so we can't park them. We like to park the vehicles front facing the road. So being that they're towed, you can't run them all the way up to the fence. You've got to have them set back so a tractor or whatever can pull them. You got to have a driveway between the fence and the first row of vehicles. So that's what we did, is we set the fence where it is now, and then we've got and the blacktop would go up to the fence, but then we've got a 30-foot driveway down through that would be between the fence and the parked vehicles.
So for just on a thought, and not committing this board to anything, just to flush it out a little more. If that were the case, and if this board decided to grant the variance, would well, I guess if we talk to Brian, but Alex, you can ask either way. Brian, would you be willing to allow the board to add a condition that there will be no parking of any vehicles on that fence, that there would be that drive aisle, that there would be no parking in there, if you follow what I'm describing?
Yes, we are comfortable with that.
Okay. All right, just a thought, just throwing it out there. I'm not suggesting in one way, shape, or form that this board is going to commit to that. All right. Those are the questions I have. Sarah, did
And just to finish
remember
up,
what you were going to ask?
No, I don't.
All right. Well, you have another cycle to think about it, and you can
Okay.
ask it next time around.
Okay.
I have a point I'd like to make.
Go right ahead, Fred.
On the site plan drawing that was just up, lower left corner is a chart that compares some of the existing and some of the proposed and some of the code requirements. And I think there's quite a bit of information there. I wish we could review that. Most of them are pretty favorable. I guess I was also wondering how the proposed layout, the periphery of it around the wetlands compares to what's there now. And that chart has something to do with that. I think it's smaller. I think the new total footprint is less than it is now. Is that true, Alex? It's less?
Yeah, we actually provided an exhibit, and I think we scrolled over it earlier, that kind of shows where some of the parking areas in the buffer were going to be turned into green space. You'll see like a red, there it is. So what we did is we overlaid the proposed limits of parking onto the existing features. So as I mentioned, one of the first things we did went out and surveyed everything to figure out where the parking was and make sure none of the parking was going to be going any further into the wetland, or into the wetland buffer, I should say. But so those red areas are actually areas that will be used for the stormwater management, which I talked about. And I think I added some square footages on there. I don't. I don't have those in front of
I
me.
don't recall seeing anything like that.
In your packet?
Yeah.
It's in the packet, but I think Fred means that there's no square footages on there.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That's all.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I called it out, but didn't put the square footages, so.
That's okay. That's okay. It's not going to determine anything. It's just less. That's my point.
So kind of for comparison, like you brought up, you know, one of the items we look at is lot coverage. And, you know, the code in the commercial light industrial requires less than 35%. Existing is 30.2 and proposed is 31.1. So we are going up slightly, but what it's due to is the area where the new entrance will be in the top right corner. We're actually taking out a number of the parking areas within the buffer though. So you can see the buffer is kind of the dashed line through there.
I think the choice of the fence is very nice.
Any other questions, Fred?
No,
Matt, any other questions?
I'm all set for now. Like I said, if I know I'll have more when I can kind of see
Right.
see the bigger picture here. But
Yep.
I mean, in general, it's doing what they can, but it would be good to see.
So can I ask a quick question so that we can prepare that the right way?
Sure.
The 50-foot setback,
Where they're close, right? 31%.
Matt, you're breaking up a little bit, but Brian, go ahead. What's your question?
well, I want to talk on that. So my question is the current 50-foot setback, is that where the fence should be, or is that an open display setback?
Al, you want to comment on that?
I believe that was supposed to be the closest point at which any product was to be displayed.
So at that point, this proposal is 3 feet,
It's
2 feet 2 feet 6 inches from being
Compliant, yes.
compliant.
So Al, if I understand what you're describing, then if the vehicles were parked, what, a little more than 2 feet where they are proposed further south, they'd be in compliance with the code? And it doesn't matter if there's a driveway there or not?
It'd be in compliance with the variance that was granted previously.
So they could have a drive aisle parallel to 96 and still be in compliance.
I'd have to go back and reread the code. I think the code refers to 80 feet to parking spaces. I don't recall whether it talks about drive aisles or not, but I believe it also applies to open displays. So I'd have to check the code for the next meeting.
Okay,
If it pertains to a drive aisle or not.
all right. I think that would get us on the same page. It sounds like they want the drive aisle, and it sounds like they're calculating that into.
So
If I understood
then
it,
we'll do a drawing.
if I understand the application right, you want the drive aisle in front of the first line of where the trailers are being parked. And it sounds like the drive aisle may not count against the distance to the right of way. So if Al's going to get clarification on that, that can make a difference in our determination.
Okay. So then to prepare, you would like to see us do an example, do a site drawing with the fence at 50 feet. That way, depending on what Al comes back with, you've got the ability to look at it both ways.
Well, Al, we're back to the question, does certainly
you
the
want to
fence can't
see
be in the right of way.
Yeah.
So wherever the fence is, does that need to be 50 feet from the right of way?
I guess my opinion would be, it talks about display area. If the trailers are displayed 50 feet from the right of way, then it would meet the code. Like I said, I will have to check on the drive aisle, but I would think the display would start where the trailers are displayed, not the open space between the fence and the trailers.
But what about the fence? How far back or how close to the?
That would depend on what variance you want to give them for that.
I think
Without a variance, where would it have to be?
it's anywhere forward of the building, correct, Dale? The
That's
front
correct.
yard?
Yep.
Okay. Sorry, I think there's a little delay if I'm not trying to cut anyone off.
Yes, that would be correct. The fence is supposed to be behind the front line of the principal building. But the fence as it exists now was previous to the existing fence code.
So kind of by nature of trying to keep the buildings towards the back of the site, we did kind of create the, the need for that variance. But again, code also only says 2 feet, and can 2 feet, a 2 foot high fence realistically provide any benefit?
So I think then the question we have before us is the 50-foot current variance for the display area. What would that look like? And then as you propose 46.7 feet from the right of way for the display area. But I think it's going to, again, help us even further fine tune this, is whether or not that drive aisle counts as a display area. I think if we're on the same page here, that drive aisle is never going to be used as a display area. It's always going to be a drive aisle.
Mhm. Correct. And I think that's something that, between code enforcement and, fire enforcement, they would want to see that. And that's what, I think Brian said he was agreeable to condition of approval. I believe when they approved the 50-foot variance, I think there was some sort of consideration that, they wanted smaller units. And I think the smaller units would typically be the tow behinds, right, Brian? Which you can't hop in and turn a key and, drive off. It needs the drive aisle. So
Brian, even I would imagine it's even in as the owners, in the best interest, no customer parking. Nobody parks there because you can't get anything in and out of there if somebody's parking in there.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that's neat about this layout is when you come in, all of the inventory will be behind, hopefully, as long as you grant the variance, all of the inventory is behind a fence. So the customers can't get into that display area without coming through the building. That's a safety thing for us and obviously a traffic control thing. The one thing we don't want is when we're moving vehicles around that yard, we don't want a kid running out front of us, something like that. So we really try to make sure that customers aren't out in that lot unless they're accompanied with employee. And so that's one of the reasons why the fence is so important. And then also from a security standpoint, as Alex said, we just 2-3 weeks ago, we had a catalytic converter stolen out of a Class C motorhome. We've had TVs taken out of RVs for years. It's just the nature of the RV business that if you don't put the product behind a fence, you're just inviting thievery. So, we think fence is really important. We love the idea of a sharp, good-looking fence. Fred, I appreciate the compliment about the fence. I mean, we think that adds a lot to the look of the facility.
I think the question of the open space between the fence and the vehicles is settled. It'll be open. And if you can measure to the vehicles, the fence can be closer to the road than that with no problem. Yes?
Is that a question for me, Fred?
No, I'm just trying to see if we have agreement on where we're measuring to.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of
It would be open.
a similar. I'm just trying to figure out how close is the fence going to be to the road, right? We had another similar application for a car dealership that wanted to also put a fence around their lot. I believe it was auto auction, right? And it ended up being in the right of way and just close to the road. And I don't believe the fence carried. I'm just trying to understand if that's the situation where I hear how close is that fence going to be to 96?
So on the 96 side, it looks like, Alex, correct me if I'm wrong, that fence is running as close as 13.6 and it stands out to 42.1.
That's correct. I mean, the fence is essentially going to be where vehicles are parked today. And the vehicles are going to be pushed back 30 feet.
But the vehicles aren't supposed to be parked there today, right? They're not supposed to be 13 feet from the road.
Yeah, and I don't know, Alex, that the vehicles always are. I don't think for the first couple years that we owned it, I don't think we understood what the variance was. But I think majority of the time those vehicles are parked for the same reason. They are parked back for a drive. Basically, we're just trying to mirror, what we're doing now is just trying to mirror the current fence line. And then having a open display setback from the fence line.
Yep. And correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, but I think the first time you saw the Valentine approved drawing was probably when we went in and met with staff and town staff gave us a copy. You know, we went into this not knowing what was approved or not approved.
Yeah, I think when I purchased the business, I do recall Mark McMahon saying something to me about a 50-foot setback. I don't know that I completely understood what it was. So, and obviously that's on me. But you know, either way, like Sarah said, this is the whole idea of this is to develop an agreement of what's compliant and stick to it going forward.
All right, I think we're on the same page here. We'll have another chance next cycle once we see the county planning board's comments. We'll all have an opportunity to, certainly Alex, make a further presentation and comment on the county planning board's comments. And then the board will have further opportunity to discuss and comment. All right, sound like a plan?
Yeah,
Sounds
appreciate your time.
Very good. Thanks so much. Thanks for your patience. Certainly don't want to cut anybody off, but again, this will be an opportunity. We'll have more time to thoroughly vet this and discuss it and talk about it. So if that's okay with everybody, then I think we're good. Our next meeting is going to be, Kim, that's going to be the 21st, right, of June?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, good. Just Kim, I want to give you a chance to say something. We've been not giving you anything, so there you go.
Appreciate that, Mike.
Okay. All right, very good. So Alex, Brian, you're all set. Anything else you want to let us know before the next one? Okay, awesome. Good.
No, we're good. Thank you.
Good. Thanks so much. See you the next
Have a good
time.
night. Yep.
You too. All right, any board members want to touch base on anything, discuss, comments, concerns?
Do you think it'd be a good idea for Kim to send us a copy of the larger size drawings, the existing and the proposed plans?
Well, what about this? If Kim makes them available and then we could go pick them up instead of sticking a whole bunch of post-its on it. And would that work for you, Fred? If she made it available, we could just come over and get it?
Sure.
Is that all right, Kim?
Yep. So you guys just want what we have now or what they're going to provide as well? Are you going to provide something, Brian, before the next meeting?
Yeah, I think we'll work on a drawing that shows the fence line at 50 feet.
Okay. I'll let you know when they're ready.
Good. That works for me.
I'm good with them electronically. You don't need to print one for me.
Okay, Matt.
All right. Anything else? Drew, anything else you want to chime in on before we have a motion to adjourn?
No, I appreciate it, guys. Next meeting, I'll be with you guys. And then after that, starting in July, you'll have Councilman Kohovic as your representative. So
Awesome.
I appreciate all the hard work the first half of the year. I'll see you guys next meeting.
You're very good. Very good. Very welcome. All right, then. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion.
Thanks, Fred. All in favor? Aye. Good. Have a good night, everyone. See you in a couple of weeks.